Okay, we are live, and good evening, everyone. Those that are tuning in this evening, and those that are in the gallery, and anybody else that's officers, welcome. So let's go through, and can I have authorisation, please, to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of April? Thank you. Jolly good. Apologies for absence, Lorna. Lisa.
Councillor Killeen, Chair.
Thank you. Additional agenda items?
There are none.
Thank you. Urgent decisions?
There are none.
Thank you. Disclosures and interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests in matters on the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. No declarations. Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry. Hazel, Councillor Timpey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, agenda item 6, member of Bexhill Town Council and trustee of the Delaware Board.
Councillor Delaney, Gareth.
Item 8, as a staff member of Bexhill and Battle Food Bank.
And Councillor Field, Catherine.
6, trustee of the Delaware.
Thank you. Okay, so the first report, item 6, is the Capital Investment and Treasury Management Strategy. Are you presenting this, Charlotte? Ash, nice to see you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So this is the agenda item 6, so Capital Investment and Treasury Management Strategies for 26-27. So just want to say, before I start, just a huge thank you and well done to Charlotte and her team for a very, very comprehensive strategy. So I'll talk through some of the main points and then I'll hand over to Charlotte, as usual, for questions. Thank you. So this agenda item, in essence, covers 3 separate areas, but predominantly related to the strategies for the year ahead. So the first one is the capital strategy. So the overarching aim of the capital strategy is to ensure that our capital programme is considered in the context of its risk, financial sustainability, ensuring plans are affordable, prudent and sustainable. So the strategy itself has been refreshed to reflect the updated council position, council plan, and the strategy seeks to support the link between the capital programme and the delivery of the council's ambitions and objectives. So the capital strategy provides a high-level overview of a couple of key areas. So planned capital expenditure, sources of funding available to the capital programme, affordability of the proposed programme, our capacity and expertise to deliver against that ambition, and how we will manage and monitor the programme, in particular the management of risk. So this section has been updated to reflect those recent changes by Cabinet on the Council's risk appetite. Second area is the Treasury strategy. So the Treasury Management Strategy has been drafted to ensure compliance with the Prudential Code, the Treasury Management Code and investment advice, and with the support of our own Treasury Management advisors, MUFG Corporate Markets. So the strategy has got 2 main focuses. The first one being Treasury Management in the context of our capital expenditure plans. Second one being broader Treasury management issues, including economic forecast on interest rates, the current Treasury management position, and the use of external providers. So this strategy has been updated to reflect the current capital programme and the resulting changes to prudential indicators. So there have been no significant changes to the proposed borrowing strategy or borrowing in advance of need. The minimum revenue provision policy now specifically covers capital loans, and that's addressed in paragraph 39. Additionally, the proposed authorised borrowing limit, which is the overarching maximum level of external debt that we can incur, and the related operation boundary limit, which represents the limit external debt, is not normally expected to exceed, have been proposed to reduce from 109.5 million and 100.5 million respectively. So this is reflective of the current forecast capital programme and our current borrowing requirements. The third area is the investment strategy. So Appendix 3 covers the investment strategy. The main investment strategy focuses on our financial treasury investments. Covers matters such as appropriate credit worthiness of our counterparties and broader credit criteria, terms of deposits, transaction limits, roles and responsibilities, etc. Our strategy position remains that we invest with our reference to our cash flow position. We will seek to invest where feasible, but our cash balances have reduced significantly, and this will be more limited than it has been in prior financial years. So we will continue to regularly monitor interest rates forecasts to inform of our decisions taken. Our investment priorities remain security first, portfolio liquidity second, and then return. So there's been no significant changes to this strategy, again, compared to the previous year. What is new and incorporated to regulise the position is contained within Appendix H of this document, and this section covers the non-treasury investments and specifically the Council's investment in our service investment in the Rother District CHC. It explores areas such as proportionality of the investments made, level investments, how we can manage the decisions around such an investment, related governance, and how we can cover any gaps in our expertise. So those are the three main areas. So I will hand over to Charlotte for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ash. Charlotte?
I'm just happy to take any
Oh, right. Are there any questions? Yep. Councillor Vegas, Christine.
Yes, I've got a question actually on the capital strategy, which is Appendix 1. And it's on paragraph 11.9, where we talk about asset management as part of our capital strategy. And I mean, this was adopted in 2024 in relation to strategic asset management plan. And I just wondered if this might be an appropriate moment for the head of our asset management to just update us on what is happening with the colonnade in relation to some of the tenancies that we've got there.
Yeah, happy to do that. So we've, as you know, been marketing it for around 6-7 weeks now. We've had really positive feedback from quite a number of traders, which I think has shown the benefit in terms of things that we've spoken here before about in terms of surrender of the restaurant lease as well, for meaning that we could open it up to food and beverage vendors. We've got a number of interim traders at the moment, but we'll soon be in the position to make decisions. We're hoping to offer leases to the smaller kiosks tomorrow and bring forward a decision on the larger restaurant in due course, but we're expecting to fill every single unit, and it's a really positive situation, I would say, in terms of where we're at.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that update.
Yep, thank you for that, Ben. Are there any other questions or points that you've raised? Gareth, Councillor Delaney.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, just in light of the election and the change of leadership, potentially, well, in Lewes, there is a change of leadership, but the Section 24 rule around local government reorganisation, would they be able to potentially retrospectively go into our capital programme, or would they be only able to have a say on future projects?
So we're not quite in that territory yet, but when we are in that territory, they'll be able to have a say on any capital procurements over the threshold, but the same would go for revenue. So they're very unlikely to change a decision that's already been taken where the procurement's already underway and the scheme is being developed. And in almost all instances, I'm just trying to think about our capital programme, but in almost all instances, what's in our capital programme will already be away before we get to section 24. But yes, section 24 would give them powers over the letting of larger contracts, including within the capital programme.
Councillor Timpey, Hazel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the answer you gave to Councillor Bayliss's question regarding the kiosk? So specifically, how many have been let and how many will we have for the summer, if any? And also what's happening to the cafe, the larger unit? If you could just expand on that, I'd be really grateful.
Yeah, I'll try and answer as best I can. Obviously, some of it's still commercially confidential for the meeting, but basically we haven't issued any formal leases yet. You'll see there's a number of interim traders down there offering tenancies at will, but they're not in kiosks. That's to say they're using some of the kiosk space. But as of the next week, we're hoping to issue offers to traders for those kiosks. For them to start trading, that'll be initially at tenancies at will, but moving into longer leases. And we're expecting those kiosk units to all be, well, I say all, most of them will be up and running by the summer. Kiosk 10 is still slightly water damaged because of the repair works that were going on, because the roof wasn't finished. When it was open and they were doing the works, water ingress came in, so it still needs to be dried. So that and the coastal office has still got a little bit of work to be done, but the rest of them will all be ready by the summer. And we're hoping much sooner than that. Ideally, some of them might be in by the bank holiday, depending on how fast they're able to set up. The larger restaurant unit, we will be bringing forward a paper to Cabinet to update on that one. But we do have a number of offers on that one, and we expect them to be able to move in. But obviously, they're a larger trader, it's a larger unit. Their fit out could take a considerable amount of time, so it will depend on which trader it goes ahead with for that one.
Councillor Project, Sue?
Thank you. With the war, and obviously there are doom and gloom forecasts in terms of interest rates and inflation, and how do we begin to take that into account, or do we wait for it to happen and affect our programme?
I'll let Charlotte have a stab at that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is difficult because all forecasts are just forecasts. So what we do is our Treasury advisors, MUFG, they issue regular bulletins on updated forecasts, both for inflation and interest rates, including bank interest rates and anticipated gilt yields, and all sorts of ranges of loans and investments. So we report that on a quarterly basis to the Audit Committee when we report the Treasury position, so they're kept up to date. In terms of our own capital programme, as you'll be aware, at the Corporate Programme Board, we do keep a watching brief on cost pressures on particular schemes where they're not in a kind of bound procurement process. So we will continue to monitor that. From a revenue perspective, we do have a sort of degree of security around our energy costs because we entered into fixed contracts last year, so that is advantageous for us on that side. Of course, what we haven't yet forecast and we don't yet know the impact is the wider supply chain impacts of energy costs rising and in turn other costs rising. So we'll certainly be keeping a watching brief on it. And we have sought to incorporate inflation in budgets for 26-27. However, at the time that we set those budgets, we weren't aware of the war. So it is still a watching brief, yeah.
Just to comment on that, and it's great that we've got the fixed term energy. But also, we have done a lot of work through the climate working group, and we have reduced our energy use, this council, is it 60%? About 60%. And once the new waste trucks are in place, it'll go up to 90%, the new fuel for the waste trucks.
Are there any other points raising from this report that anyone wants to Okay, now this report is one for, just remind me.
Full council.
It's going to be referred to full council. So if we can just identify that that's the case, can we have it moved? And those in favour of report going forward. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Charlotte. And we just move forward to the next item. 7, I'm just getting
Licenses to occupy public conveniences.
45. Okay, right. Agenda item 7, licences to occupy public conveniences with Bexhill-on-Sea Town Council and Rye Town Council. Are you going to present this, Hazel, please? Thank you. Councillor Timpey.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, though, could I just point out in this report on page 46, the 2 toilets, Lucknow's Place and the Station Approach, are actually not currently run by Rye Town Council. So that impacts the number that we're talking about. So this report now is about seeking approval to enter into 12-month licence to occupy for 8 public conveniences currently operated by Bexhill Town Council and Rye Town Council. And this will formalise arrangements that have been in place since 2025. Since that time, both councils have managed day-to-day operation of our toilet facilities, helping to keep them open during peak summer months and holidays. Draft licences have now been prepared to provide clarity, accountability and legal protection. So Cabinet is asked to approve RDC entering into licences with each council. The term would be 12 months from the signing. The operation as public conveniences for public benefit. Rent is peppercorn, and the responsibilities are split. Town councils will be responsible for operation, cleaning, internal works and maintenance, and Rother Council will be responsible for structural repair and maintenance. Responsibility remains with the council. So the next steps after the 12 months, the facilities are intended to be either devolved to the relevant town council or leased commercially for the sites that have been identified as suitable. If neither has occurred after 12 months, the licence can be renewed, rolled over or ceased. So the sites that we're talking about, in Bexhill there are 6 of them. West Parade is a commercial lease, East Parade is a commercial lease. Pear Tree Lane Roundabout Little Common, that's a commercial lease. Recreation Ground Little Common is a proposal to be devolved. Nymphill Road Sidley is a proposal to be devolved. Coast Road Normans Bay devolved. And in Rye, we've just got the 2, as I mentioned before, Strand Quay commercial lease, Gun Gardens commercial lease. So the options we have are do nothing and continue without a legal agreement, which is not recommended due to legal and operational risk and lack of clarity about obligations. We can close the facilities, but this isn't in the public interest and would negatively affect residents and visitors. Rother could operate them directly, but we have previously considered this is not financially viable, so the preferred option is to approve licences to formalise the arrangements and reduce risk. So I'm asking Cabinet to approve RDC entering into licences for 8 public conveniences, 6 in Bexhill, 2 in Rye, with the signing in May or thereafter to continue operation and management. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel, for the clarity of that report. Are there any comments? Christine, Councillor Bayliss?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'd like to actually put on record my thanks to Bexhill Town Council and also Rye Town Council for the way that they've worked with us on this. There was, I think, one summer where our toilets were closed and they caused a lot of disquiet and angst in the town, and I think it's, it's good that we've been able to work in partnership with this sort of informal arrangement, which now it needs to be formalised and pulled together properly. The Little Common roundabout lease, I thought that had already been signed and the keys handed over, but maybe I've jumped the gun there, I'm not sure. And finally, I just wondered if it might be opportune for Charlotte to talk about special expenses, because I'm sure there are people watching this who will understand that actually through special expenses we've raised some money to operate these toilets. And also I know from publicity that Bexhill Town Council have put out around the town that they have also raised some council tax to pay for the toilets. So can we be assured that there'll be some exchange of cash to follow, if you like, the responsibility of who's actually maintaining the public conveniences, so that they're maintained to a high standard? Thank you.
Charlotte, did you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, so I was just trying to open a document. I don't believe, but I'll circulate a note if I'm incorrect about this. I don't believe our special expense covers any of these public conveniences. However, our special expense does cover a number of other community assets within Bexhill and the Rye parishes. We have collected a special expense for 26-27 in respect of those assets. Should the transfer of those assets occur before the end of this financial year, then yes, of course, we'll reconcile the spending on those assets and the special expense that's being collected in respect of them, and then we'll come back to members for a decision on what is to happen with that funding that's being collected for those specific purposes. But just to reiterate, I don't believe there is any special expense collected for these particular conveniences. Thank you.
Hazel.
Yeah, thank you. Bexhill Town Council have £170,000 in their budget for these toilets to maintain them. And the special expenses are for parks and the cemetery, nothing to do with the toilets at all.
Catherine, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. I think this is clearly a very good outcome for Bexhill Town Council and for Rye Town Council. I think we also need to remember, though, that these are not the only public conveniences in the district. There are others, some of which, particularly in Battle, half of the supply is closed and rapidly getting very derelict. A long time ago, when we first started talking about this, I was told in no uncertain terms you couldn't do anything with the public conveniences that wasn't done at a commercial rate and at best value for the council, and we mustn't lose any money on it. And yet now I hear that some of them are being let at a peppercorn rent, and I don't understand how to reconcile those 2 points of view.
I'll ask Joe if he got hold of that question, okay, and come back, Joe, please.
Yeah, the license. This is an arrangement to keep the toilets open while we do something longer term with those specific toilets, so that the peppercorn arrangement is to facilitate their remaining open, whereas the commercial leases, which was a previous decision taken by Cabinet to lease those, which would generate a commercial interest, is a separate avenue.
If I could just pursue that slightly, then why couldn't the ones which are now closed and rotting have been kept open on a peppercorn rent as a facility for a town?
So with Battle, those that have not proceeded with commercial leases have been offered to the respective parish or town council for devolution. And if they wish to take them and keep them open, then that remains an option.
I think my point is, if it's okay to rent them now at a loss at a peppercorn now, why wasn't it okay before they fell into disrepair?
I'd have to double check, but my understanding is that these are the only ones that they've proposed to keep open. So we can't ask them to keep open things that they don't wish to, the town councils. So they've put forward that they will they've committed to opening some toilets and undertaking that, but they've not committed to doing that to every single toilet that we have that's there in the area. And if we're not choosing to do them and they're not choosing to do them, that's the situation as to why they're closed.
Does that clarify your... I hear what you said. Yes, fine.
I couldn't disagree more profoundly.
So, Councillor Projer.
We are where we are, as they say. As Councillor Field says, it's a long, long story. And actually, Councillor Bayliss's question raises the history of Burwash and Robertsbridge running their own car park and toilets for years and years now, but also paying for the toilets in Bexhill and Rye for years and years. And you talk about double taxation, but that wasn't fair. And now we've got the story of where we can't have freehold on the toilets. That changed. Oh, no, that changed. So now we can have freehold. And now it's changed again. We can have licenses. It just crosses my mind. Why didn't we have licenses right from the beginning?
Or freehold.
Or freehold, yes. And it just crosses my mind, and maybe how much officer time, how many years, what a cost it has had to get to this point. And I'm so glad you got to this point, because this is probably where we wanted to get to. Out of 11 originally, we were going to have a commercially operated. I think we've got 5 left. Let's hope that those 5, at least some of them, actually come to fruition. But the story's not finished, is it? Not quite. I hope we've got the legal services sorted out now, because that's taken time. So that would be reassuring to know that.
Did you want to make a comment, Joe, with regard to some of the points that were raised there?
I think it's challenging. There's a long history to this. I can reassure members that since the present team have picked it up, we prior to local government reorganisation being announced, felt that, and members agreed, that the commercial interest was a valid thing to pursue to reduce costs to the council, to enhance the local economy, benefit to the local economy and employment functions and amenities for the public, and maintaining toilets was felt to be a win-win. LGR's changed that framing, I think it's fair to say, and the current offer or proposal before you is simply to ensure that the toilets can be maintained and kept open to the public usage without a cost to this council, because we have already stated we cannot afford to run them or operate them, to allow time for them to either be devolved to the respective parish or town council, or for the commercial lease to come to fruition. So really it's a bridging proposal just to get us to that point of those longer term outcomes. Again, the outcome being, I would say, the main thing to focus on, to preserve these assets for the use of continued generations, and to react and respond to our financial position, which unfortunately no one has chosen, means we're unable to sustain and afford to run these as previous generations were able to enjoy. So I think in terms of outcome, we've got there, and I think we can get behind that. And I do appreciate, though, that the process and the means has been somewhat circuitous at points. Yeah.
Okay. And the heart of that, of what you said, is it wasn't our choice. I mean, I think toilets should be a statutory provision. We should have the funding for it. And it isn't. We should be allowed to spend money how we like. And we don't. We can't. Thank you. Thank you for getting where you are now.
Christine, did you want to come?
No, I think
You've
Joe
covered
has
that.
answered, has said what I would say.
It has been quite a long journey, and there's been a lot of deviations along the way as to what we can do and what we couldn't do. But I think we've got it to a reasonably satisfactory outcome at the moment. So I think that we can just make sure that everything does crystallise as we intend, with the commercial acquisition and the town councils taking on their area of responsibility. Yeah, I think there is something to be said that these sort of things, from a statutory point of view, should be provided. But we were guided as to what we could do and what we couldn't do.
I just wondered if anybody was able to answer Councillor Prochat's question about the cost in officer time that this is all been?
Yeah, there's been a significant amount of work, and we've had a significant amount of various officers involved at different stages. And, you know, the whole LGR was something which we did not know that was coming down the line. It was a bit of a, and therefore that started to change things. I believe other local authorities have been involved in devolution some years ago. They got, you know, moved and they haven't been involved with this. So, as we say, we are where we are. Any other points that are there? No? Okay, so I think we need to move. Yeah. You're proposing and seconding. Those in favour that we formalise the arrangements in accordance with the agenda item, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Agenda item 8. Update on community grant scheme and the next steps. Cabinet member Teresa Colleen's not here this evening, but I think Anna and Anne are here. I've got a declaration coming in from over on the right-hand side. Gareth?
Yeah, just redeclaring as a staff member of Bexhill Battlefield Bank.
Thank you. And therefore, we're going to be updated as to grants awarded through the particular scheme, which is always a very favourable one for us to identify. And I do like the wording, I think I saw it here, community grants. I think that's a key word, as opposed to parish council grants. So, yeah, I think that this is important that the community benefit from these, and I think the work that we've had done with the just remind me, the Sussex Community Foundation, I think has made this process work quite well. In fact, very well indeed. So Anna, over to you.
Thank you. So it's to brief Cabinet on the outcome of the 25-26 Community Grant Scheme and to highlight key lessons learned, to outline the proposed arrangements for the forthcoming year. So a bit of background. So as the leader said, we partnered with Sussex Community Foundation for the first time to administer the grant scheme for this year with a £100,000 budget. The scheme aligned completely with the council plan priorities and was launched in September 2025, and decisions were made in December 2025. There were 52 applications requesting £462,843 worth of grant applications. This is significantly higher than anything that we've had in the last 10 years. I mean, specifically over the last 6 years, we've not spent even half of the community grant scheme budget. But because we did have 52 applications amounting to nearly, £463,000, we did award grants to 15 projects, but there were people that were disappointed, naturally. But what it did do, through the partnership with SCF, it delivered a much faster application and awards process, with grants being made within the outcome being decided within 10 weeks of application. So that was very positive. There are lessons learned, particularly around how parishes applied for the grants. So parishes this year were encouraged to partner with a community organisation to score higher on the application process. This did happen successfully, but there were a couple of parishes that didn't score so highly, and that's reflected in our lessons learned looking back over the project. So one of the key things that we want to do is encourage more parish and community group partnership and to help them strengthen their applications. SCF have offered to speak to any parishes at the launch of the new scheme and talk them through what they need to do, and our sort of key tips are available to everybody. There's also going to be, it came up at the Cabinet briefing, but we're going to include a tick box in the application so that all ward members are aware of what applications are being made and to encourage the applicant to make contact. So the proposed next steps, we're hoping that with your endorsement we can continue the scheme for 26-27 and 27-28 at the same funding level, which is £100,000 plus the admin costs. That there will be complete delegated authority to members of the grants panel, and that will be up to 5 members. Another lessons learned is to make sure that we have complete representation of all parties and geographic areas within the panel. So the recommendation is just for Cabinet to note the successful outcomes, to approve the continuation of the scheme, and to endorse the proposed governance arrangements so that we can ensure timely and effective support for the local community projects. I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Anna, for clarifying the main points of that report. Councillor Projak, Sue?
Yeah, a number of questions need to be noted and taken forward, I think. One of those is the money raised from the lottery. That is a Rother lottery which the Alliance set up, and it contributes to the grants. How is that going to operate under East Sussex or Sussex, One Sussex or whatever we are? How is that going to operate? And I know that you say that the Sussex Community Foundation does work already with the County Council, but residents and non-resident, I guess, support the lottery. They choose their favourite organisation and support the lottery, and within Rother. So that's an issue to be thought about. The other is that we talked about success of some of the projects, and we talked about having a member tour of. I met at the councillor from parish councillor from Hurst Green, how delighted they were with their play equipment, which actually is a parish council project, and it is amazing. It's a beautiful, beautiful boat, and I think that it would be good for members and officers to see some of these lovely projects that are completed. I think the other thing is that we have other grants which pop up, like the climate strategy grants, and could all these be pulled into one place so that people could actually see and have a link into how to apply for them? Because we're very proud of how little money goes a long way in Rother. It's really good. I think that the parishes will have to understand, and I think you've said you would do that, understand the difference with the way it's going in terms of community groups being more important. I think they need to understand that. I think those were the main questions. I asked about the deadline for completion of projects, and I think that was one of the things that we were going to ask about. And that you're actually scoring people higher if they've got a community group involved. Thank you.
Thank you for those points. So I think these are points that we have sort of touched on, and I think are relative. So Anna, you're making notes of these, I believe.
Yes, so the deadline for the grant for the projects to be completed is a year after the award, so that's in the report. I totally agree with you about other grants, and we've got somebody pulling together a web page with all the grants with links to how you apply with all the guidance, so that's in progress at the moment. A member tour, that is planned. If we get approval, that's planned from June onwards, so that you can go and have a look at some of the projects, and we'll do press releases and stuff like that, so that's in the plan. The more difficult question is about the lottery and how will that be protected as we go into local government reorganisation. I mean, Lorna might know more. I mean, as I understand it at the moment, that can continue, but yeah, Lorna, please, jump in.
Lorna.
Thanks, Anna. We are seeking advice from some Surrey authorities that also have a lottery, and they've asked the same question. They're getting advice on that. So as soon as we've had that back, we can update members.
Councillor Paul Osborne.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I've no complaints from me. You'll be pleased to hear. And obviously the scheme has been very successful. Anna's sort of touched on a couple of the bits. I always sort of encourage my parishes to apply, and then I hear nothing. So the fact now that we as sort of ward members will be told or informed or asked for our support, as we were with the previous community grant scheme, would be welcome, because then at least we know. We go, you turn up to a parish council meeting and say, we didn't get a grant. You say, I didn't know you applied for it. So that's a bit embarrassing, but if that can be sorted out, then that's good. The other thing, I may have mentioned it before, but and Sue, Councillor Prochak, sort of touched on it. If you look at this sort of Appendix A, the first four there, Battle, Moorhall, Beckley, De Pelham and Brightlin, is all sort of grants for sort of solar panels and batteries and upgrades to electrics, which, could have or should have, if you like, came via the green sort of grants that we had specifically for village halls. So that's a shame that they're taking from there, when especially there was a lot of interest, sort of almost 4 times oversubscribed, when that sort of best part of 35,000 quid could have come from the sort of the green seal levy that we put aside. So hopefully the money we spent on the surveys of all the village halls has been useful in this respect. But it's a shame they didn't get in there a bit earlier and use that money for what it was sort of meant for, if you like. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Councillor Prochak, sir.
Following up on that, thank you, Paul, Councillor Osborne. We did have a whole scheme for solar panels for village halls and for reducing energy costs. In fact, on polling day, we toured around the whole of each of the polling stations in Northern Rother, and nearly all of them had solar panels. And I assumed they were from our solar panel project under climate emergency. So I don't know the answer.
And Anna's got the answer.
Yeah, I think it's a correct assumption. That scheme was hugely successful, and it paid out a lot of money to a lot of different village halls. That money is spent now, but as Councillor Osborne mentioned, there is the SIL as well. But I think it comes back to your point, Councillor Prochak, about making sure it's all brought together in one place.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And when you look at Appendix A, where the distribution is, I think that is all good news. And I think this is something which so often we've got to get out there. Good news is good news. And there's a lot of other things that are going on that dampens people's enthusiasm. So if we can move this... I beg your pardon. Sorry, Sue, Councillor Byrne, you just sort of crept up on me.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, Chairman, for Leader, for the opportunity. Just a quick point on this thing, that I think that residents, I don't know the figures, but I think residents would expect any payment to the lottery to go to projects, to initiatives like this. They wouldn't want any money to get lost on something else. Now, I don't know how much is raised from the lottery, but it's clearly what we've given, the 100,000 last year, is not enough, because we're talking about tours of successful projects, but there's also all the ones, huge number, that weren't successful. So I would just ask, where is the balance correct? Are we using all the lottery money to put into this pot to make it as big as we possibly can?
Is there an answer for that? It looks like Charlotte's got an answer.
I don't have the exact numbers on me. I can certainly communicate them subsequently, but what I can tell you is that the pot here is substantially larger than the revenue generated by the lottery.
I know
Thank
some,
you.
I know
Thank you,
some
Charlotte.
lottery money, a percentage, and I haven't got it on me now, that goes to running the lottery, the people who run the lottery. Before I finish, though, I did want to publicly say, everybody look at Appendix D, because the quality impact assessment is so, so good. And we could all learn from it.
Are there any other comments from anywhere? No. Online? No. So the recommendation is on the report there that there's every reason that we support this going forward. It's good news, and we must get that news out there. All those in favour? Moved. Seconded. Rory, thank you. Thirded. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right. 71. Yep, I've got 71. Agenda item 9, temporary accommodation programme update. Head of Housing and Strategic Assets. Rory. Yeah, thank you, Rory. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chair. This is asking for Cabinet approval to amend the capital programme to reflect the fact that we've received some extra grant through the Local Authority Housing Fund, £566,000. So that's good news, I would say, and I'm sure my colleagues will support this. But just the context that we're in is still pretty tough. There are 264 households in temporary accommodation, and 70% roughly of that accommodation is pretty costly third-party provision. So that puts increasing pressure on our general fund. So this paper is an update and asks for an amendment that accords with our long-term objectives to focus on cost avoidance through lessening use of bed and breakfast, for instance, and other highly expensive provision. That cost avoidance, again, is good, and it's a proper way to go. I mean, it's $975,000 a year that we don't spend on this in this expensive accommodation. But also, I think the other important factor is that through acquiring our temporary accommodation units, we are actually pushing up the standards of our housing, so that people do have high quality accommodation instead of relying on the private sector, where accommodation is, as we know, pretty variable. At the moment, we have 75 units of temporary accommodation, move-on properties, mainly in Bexhill and Rye. And through this round 4 of the LAHF allocation, we're expected to spend £2.4 million to deliver an extra 14 homes. So I think it's the right thing to do, and I ask colleagues' approval to amend the capital programme to reflect the grant that we've received. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Rory, for that. Councillor Field, Catherine?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I would agree. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, and a very good move for the district and indeed the people in need of housing. Slightly tangentially and anecdotally, I would say I've been out and about talking to people a lot recently, and I met a person, a woman and her family, who just moved out of temporary accommodation into the social housing on Blackfriars, and she was thrilled to bits. So it was going to be her forever home, and she couldn't have been more grateful and more happy. So I think that's a good news story, and it works in tandem with things we're doing in other areas.
An excellent example of making it work. Joe, just out of interest, how long are people staying in temporary accommodation for? Is there a sort of a reasonable period of time that they would expect it to find somewhere from a housing association or otherwise?
It's extremely variable, to be honest, Chair. It's hard to give a consistent number. There are averages, but they sometimes hide the experience that different individuals and families experience. Our single people and couples tend to be waiting a little longer because there's less available. But we're looking at, whereas it used to be months earlier in my career. It used to be months earlier in my career. In recent times, it's now years consistently. You're looking at two years on average for 3-bed houses, that sort of time frame. But it's very variable, particularly with developments like Blackfriars coming forward and the developments at North Bexhill coming forward, it tends to clear the decks somewhat from those. So you can be lucky, as it were, and go into temporary accommodation shortly before a big development like that comes forward, or unlucky and have to wait some time. Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that. Has anybody else wanted to make any points? Oh yes, sorry John, I didn't quite see you there. Councillor John Barnes. John?
Yes, I can't help feeling, Leader, that we probably ought to look again at the next project for the housing company, because clearly what Joe said is very worrying in terms of the use made of temporary accommodation at the moment. And we really do need some social housing underway, because I feel the housing market is pretty dead at the moment. And the community associations, housing associations, of course, have got all the upgrade of their property to do, so they're not investing very much. However, that's something that came out of the debate. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is whether we're taking any steps to extend these acquisitions to the rural area, because we do have some problems in the rural area, and I know of nothing that's going on there in this programme, so I would ask that question. The other one is, can we have an update on what's happening with the town hall? Is that going to be used for temporary accommodation? Thank you very much.
Joe, would you like to respond to the questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So on the rural areas, that is a challenge, and it becomes a challenge of management as well. But we do keep our options open. It can be very challenging. Often our temporary accommodation residents don't have ready access to a car, which is obviously often in general, these are unhelpful generalisations. In general, so to invest in a property assumes that we will always have temporary accommodation people who fit that property's requirements who have a car, it can be unusual depending on the property type. So we tend not to, and also proximity to other essential facilities such as shops, etc. So it's not something we tend to do, but the market towns and larger villages, it's certainly something we can look at. On the second point, which has gone out of my head, Town Hall, thank you, excuse me. So we do have a full comprehensive report coming forward later in the summer to update members, because that was requested by members. So I would like to wouldn't like to say too much about that on this evening, but we are looking at opportunities to bring forward a range of options on our land. And that's something we're looking at with the accountants presently to try and build a modest, it's fair to say, pipeline of council-owned land, which has been mooted variously in different forums over the years, trying to package that all together in light of the new Social and Affordable Homes programme, which has just closed. The first funding round has just closed. So while I agree with your observations, Councillor, about the general state of the affordable housing and housing market, we do hope that the Social and Affordable Homes programme and that 39 billion that's being earmarked will provide a bit of a sea change in the coming months and years as that capital gets utilised by our registered provider partners and local authorities. Also, with the new mayor coming forward in the next 18 months to 24 months, I really feel that will help bring forward larger strategic sites longer term, which will start to address some of these more serious issues and systemic issues with affordable housing supply. But that's a little way off. But in the short term, the SAP, which is a horrible acronym, the Social and Affordable Homes Programme, I think will provide us with some pipeline.
Okay, thank you, Joe. John, do you want to come back on any points there?
Yes, I was going to observe that although the bulk obviously needs to be in urban settings and market towns. There are things like the flexibus. We do still have some mainline buses, and there are, of course, railway stations. So we're not totally without options in the rural area, although I agree with Joe. It's very difficult if you haven't got access to a car to live outside a village. But inside a village, the flexibus does run and serve quite usefully.
Right, thank you. Councillor Project, sir?
Just a quick question. When we come to the report later in the summer, you say for the looking at the housing company and their pipeline of assets or sites, how does the social and affordable homes programme fit in with that?
So, Chair, just to clarify, that was later this summer as a report about the town hall. It won't involve the housing company, excuse me.
Sorry, I thought you said that you were looking at all our council-owned sites.
Yeah.
And that you hope that the social and affordable homes programme could provide funding.
In future. So the current round is closed. So we're trying to build a pipeline of sites for the next round, which will be in the next year or so. The social and affordable homes programme will support the market more generally and the RP sector more generally to access the grant in the short term to bring forward land that's allocated in our local plan.
That would be for the housing company.
The housing company is a delivery, the housing company is an autonomous entity in itself, so it may bring forward proposals, and it has a business plan that it's bringing forward through the subcommittee to this cabinet in due course, which I think will be ready in the next month or so. But in terms of the council's delivery options, it remains to be seen what the most expedient and cost-effective routes to delivering housing on our own sites may be, but the housing company will be considered in that group of options alongside tendered disposals to the market, alongside self-delivery options as a council. It really does depend on so many variables, it's difficult to preempt what the most financially sort of efficient way of delivering housing is for this council. It'll be very site-specific.
So it's all very much work in progress, and there's obviously several lines of delivery coming forward, and we just hope that we can maximise the advantage of that. So we want to move this report. Thank you, Rory, and second this report. Thank you, Catherine. Those in favour? Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. I think that concludes tonight's meeting.
Yes, it does.
1928, the meeting is closed. Thank you, everybody.